Right, we are on Chapter 9, Talent, Careers, and Development. And this is where the employee has now come into the organization. They've been onboarded, they're training, they're kind of stepping into their career, at least this chapter of their career at your company, whether it's a new hire or someone who's more senior. So, like the overarching umbrella that we want to look at is this concept of talent management. So, let me just go through it. Identifying the most important jobs in a company. Let's pause right there. This begins with figuring out what your core competencies are. Like what is an area where you can't afford to fail at your company. So if you're Google, it's probably your programmers. It's probably not your landscapers. If you're Boeing, it's probably your engineers. It's probably not fill in the blank, whatever else, your operators. So there's in each particular firm based on their core competency that gives them a competitive advantage over everyone else. There are a handful of positions to say this is an area where we can't fail specifically. So identifying those jobs, and it doesn't mean other jobs aren't important. It just means that's your core competency. They provide a long-term and competitive advantage. And then once you've identified them, my summation of this last half is how do we not fail in this area? We need to have contingency plans and we need to have a plan to back up that plan. One of my favorite movies is Armageddon with Bruce Willis, and he's talking with NASA, and he goes, "I'm sure you have a backup plan, and then people thinking about that plan, and then people thinking backing them up." So something like that. So when you can't fail, obviously you take it a little bit more seriously. So what we do is we find those jobs. We staff them through recruiting, selection, and placement. Yes, and then when they're in those jobs, this is what we begin to think about: training, development, appraisals, all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a career model. And then in the end, in theory, we have management talent to lead. We have important job, whatever that core competency is. We have that talent in place, as well as a plan to back it up, and people who are cared for and therefore look favorably upon the organization. The target jobs after they've been identified, the next step is to quickly to go into the idea of what does it take to do that job well. So it's a KSAO, I guess, inventory, knowledge, skills, abilities, and then we might say other, like competencies. But a KSA inventory. So if someone's going to kill it in this job, they need to know this. They need to they need to have the skills in this area, and they need to have these abilities and be able to leverage them in the workplace. Once we have the inventory, now what you have is when I hire people, I'm looking at those KSAs. When I develop people, I'm looking at those KSAs. And when people leave, I'm looking at those KSAs to see what's actually walking outside of my company so I can develop it and replace it. So there's different models of this. I did one called a skills management system, which is an inventory, like that works. This has to be updated, obviously, continually change, especially in certain sectors. But without this kind of list or this model of this is what people in this job, which we all agree is one of the most important jobs of the company, this is what these people have to be able to do. That tells us, that informs everything: hiring, firing, promotion, demotion, etc. down the line. A component in this, of course, is succession planning. If I have someone who has a unique skill set that my company desperately needs, and there's one of those humans, I better have a succession plan because life happens and car accidents happen and families relocate and stuff changes. You can't just assume, oh, as long as that guy's here, that lady's here, we're going to be fine. No, heck no. Succession planning is when we say this person is going to leave eventually. If they left today, what's our plan? And if everyone sits around and scratches their head, that means you don't have a succession plan. A succession plan is there's no fear when anybody from the top of the company to the bottom company decides they're not coming to work tomorrow or ever. We have a plan for that. There's a lot of pilots end up taking this class as part of their management sequence, and pilots are great because like if something goes wrong with the aircraft, you just pull out a clipboard and go, we've got a plan for that. Like there's an app for that, right? So it's kind of like that. There's no matter what happens with our human capital, we have a plan and we're ready to go. And part of that plan is identifying who are what we call hypo, or the high potential people. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I think people get like psychologically screwed up on hypo. People come on and off a succession plan list. It doesn't mean that you like them and you don't. It means something's changed in the career and the organization. People come on and off high potential lists, and that's hurtful for them. So some companies have said, you know what, this isn't worth it, because if we tell someone in year 2 they're high potential, and in year 5 it's like, well, they're not really being considered anymore, then you end up losing them, which is otherwise a good employee. So you can see on the left is potential assessment, meaning do they have potential? Are they coming in with kind of the raw materials that need to be refined in terms of judgment or ability, verbal intelligence, whatever it is, and can we develop them? And along the bottom is, how are they actually doing with that? You might find someone who's absolutely incredible. You see they have so much potential, but they're just not delivering. They're not performing well on the job. You put that in the category of a rough diamond. Like they're not doing it. They need to be refined. They're not ready yet. Or someone who consistently gets high performance ratings, but they don't demonstrate competencies that they can grow in the company into those vital positions, those vital jobs. That's the lower right. You'd say that's a high professional, meaning like they're good. Where we put them, they're good. If we move them, they may not be good anymore. Stuff like that. So you can use this as kind of a framework to go through. But the reason I don't like it is we put a name in a box, and then the name ends up staying in that box, even if the person changes their potential or their performance. So it needs to be adaptable. It's contingent upon time. And in terms of overall kind of career management, I mean, the historical model is that the organization is the owner of the person's career development, meaning they say when they're going to get promoted, how much money they're going to make, what their next job assignment is going to be. And then we find that people who are entering the workforce go, well, what if I don't like your idea? What if I want to do something else? And the company says, well, this is our plan for you. And the person says, peace out, sucker. Like that's not what it is for me. So now it's very much joint, where the organization goes, okay, what do we need in the future? What kind of leaders do we need, and skill sets do we need? Is there a match here with you and what you want to do? And then you go to the bottom when the person says, here's what I think I'm good at. And sometimes they're way off. Like we call this self-awareness. They go, I'm good at this, and everyone around them goes, no, you're not. Well, okay, then there's some coaching. And a lot of times you find people who don't know they're excellent at something and need to be affirmed in that way. Next person, a big component of the bottom, the individual perspective, is what do I want to do, right? You've got the baby boomer generation that's like work, productivity, it kind of the stereotypes, right? Is faithful, they're not going to turn over, etc. Then you got Gen X that saw their parents, kind of work themselves forever and retire with a gold watch, and they go, I don't want to do that. I'm not so interested in titles or even money. I want to go do something cool. I want to go do something different. And so they require a bit more interface. Finally, you have the millennials that are looking for much more of the balance and this idea of I want to make an impact. Millennials, 6 months onto a job, they're like, I'm going to quit. Well, why are you going to quit? Because I was brought into a job where my work isn't mattering. It's not my pay, it's not supervision, it's not anything, but what I'm doing, I don't feel like it's making an impact. Remember that from the job characteristics model called task significance or task identity. So these two things come together. So I don't go to someone and say, hey, here's a succession plan and you're going to be on it. I say, hey, here's this position in the company. Think like you're moving in this direction. Do you want to? This is kind of how we see you. Is that how you see you? Do you see you as something different? So it's much more in a consultation kind of role. Overall, in the overall career planning at an individual level, what the person thinks, and charts like this always crack me up because they're so variant, but here's the big idea. Figure out who you are. Like, what do you want? What are you about? Figure out how you're viewed. How do other people see you? Is there alignment there? Developing self-awareness. With who you are and how you're viewed, what are your options? Are your options the technical route? Is it the management route? Is it something else? Is it you want to do sales? You want to do operations? Then you create your plan and then execute your plan. Here's the problem with that. Who I was at 20 is very different than who I was at 35, and probably different than who I'm going to be at 45. So that changes. When that changes, the plan should change. How I'm viewed is highly dependent on what context I'm in. There are some consistencies, but there's a lot of variance too. Therefore, my options are going to shift. Therefore, what I actually want to do is going to shift. So this is kind of like the individual, at an individual human level, the strategic planning process. This is our strategic plan based on the information we have right now. That might change in 3 months. It probably won't change tomorrow. It is definitely going to change in 5 years. So just like hold it loosely. But the idea here is you don't just go get a job and go, we'll see what happens next. You kind of want to be intentional about what the end point is going to be. There's a book called Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, which I don't really like the book, but there is there is one thing in there. I think it's habit number 2 says begin with the end in mind. So that is the end of the career or the next step of the career. What do you want it to look like? And then you're making adjustments accordingly to get that. This is not in the book or test or anything, but this is something that every HR person and every manager has been burned on at some point. Where I burned myself was with engineers. I find a really good engineer that everybody respected, and I promote them to a manager. I did this early on, not realizing those are actually different skill sets. So I would often lose a good manager. Sorry, I would often lose a good engineer and get a crappy manager. So as we're moving people throughout the careers, that whole KSAO inventory of what does it take to do good in this job really matters. You can't say, well, they're good at this job, therefore they'll be good at this job. They're good at job A because there's a fit between the tasks, duties, responsibilities of that job and the knowledge, skills, abilities of the person. That's person-job fit. When we move them, we may lose that fit. So we've got to keep that in mind as we're going through. At an individual level, this is what I ask anybody really. Actually, this is showing up for career advice. This is a coaching session, and that is, what do you love? Like, what are you interested in? And they say, well, recently I've been into, and I say, no. Throughout like your life, as long as you can remember, what have you enjoyed? What has been life-giving for you to do? There's a researcher, positive psychology. Where the heck is he? He's at Claremont. His name is Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and he does research on what's called flow. And that is when you're doing something, you're like, oh my gosh, this is great. I absolutely love this. I just got an email from a former student who is in BUDS, who's trained to be a Navy SEAL, and he's talking about all the crap that they're going through, the intense physical stuff, and he's like, this is awesome. This is right where I want to be. I'm having so much fun. And I'm thinking, that wouldn't do it for me, but okay, I'm glad it does for you. So that's just an interest or a passion. After that, it's what are you good at? If my passion is football and I'm not good at it, that's probably not my career. So both of these things kind of have to align. What are you good at? Where is there a great need and your great joy? Kind of where do those things come together? Next, of course, is personality. Personality, which is pretty stable in people. Is it conducive to this job? And the last one is values. And there's all kinds of examples here, but so one of my values is my family and my career. I want it to be formed around my family, not forming my family around my career, etc. I'm interested in sales and marketing. I'm really good at it. I have an extroverted personality, and so I have this great job making Budweiser campaigns, except I'm a former alcoholic and it cost me my family. Well, we have a what's called role conflict there. There's incongruence in the values. So we look for alignment in all of these things, and then we go, okay, well, let's press into that and explore the options at that point. Throughout the longitudinal aspect of the career, these are huge stereotypes. But again, as I've said, stereotypes exist for a reason. You got 20 to 30, 30 to 50, 50 to 60, and 60 to 70 years old. I guess one thing that I'll point out is you can see this aligns with the typical evolution of a family, right? So 20 to 30 years old, you care about salary, right? A lot. It's a psychological thing. Like, I want to get a house. I want to pay my bills. I want to feel secure. Once you start hitting mid-career, you go, what am I making this money for if I can't go to my kid's soccer game on Saturdays? So you begin to think about well-being and work-life balance and stuff like that. Late career, and especially career end. Late career is where I see it creep up a lot, as people go, what am I doing here? Like, am I making a difference? Is there going to be am I leaving any kind of a legacy? You hit 50, 60, 70 years old going, does this matter? And that's where you see a lot of times it's great for mentorship, because people go, my legacy is going to be investing in people, not only investing in product. And they begin to grab and pour into kind of the next generation of leaders, if you will. So kind of a standard process. Once they get to that career end, we begin to think about retirement issues. And it's awesome, but it's dangerous for us as the company, because we have a brain full of knowledge in a heart full of passion toward the values of the company, and now they're walking out the door. So we're like, ugh. So this is where we go. Do we have our succession plans in place? Like, are we ready for this person to leave? And when they leave, is there a way? I love this process. There's phased retirement, and that works great if the employee wants to do it. But this idea of a consulting arrangement, meaning, okay, you've done this job for X number of years, you're awesome at it, you've been pouring in and mentoring the next generation to take it over. They're not to where you are yet. Can we keep you on a contract or a retainer or a consultant or something where, I don't know what it is, once a month at the beginning, then once every 6 months, and then once a year, you come in and you're welcome here, assuming it fits with your company, to just kind of speak life into what we're doing, or show us things that you would think about. Doesn't mean you're going to just blindly obey them, but all that expertise walking out, if there's a way to like honor that and keep that and retain that doesn't break the budget, it can be super beneficial. A couple of problems and then some stages, and then this one's pretty short, so that's fine. So a few problems. The technical and professional workers. So this is where I want to go a technical route, but the standard psychological component to growth is a management route. So often what we want to have is a career path for technical workers. In my head, I even think like accountants and engineers or operators or welders or whatever, a career path that's reflected in terms of influence and even salary, that's a different model, a different pathway than the management route. Meaning, this is one of my experiences. There was 4 levels in this job. Level 5 was a commitment that you're going to go the technical route for a while, and they were just getting better and becoming a subject matter expert. And then otherwise at level 4, you would be promoted to a manager. So that's when you're going to go the management route. Those salaries at each jump were the same. So you'd have a super like senior expert in an area, and they're making 250 grand a year, which is over here what a director or an executive is making. So they weren't capped in terms of salary because the company basically said, no, we value both of these. We value managerial leadership, but we need someone who is the technical expert in our products and our processes. So there's 2 ways to do it. Women in careers, sequencing. So this is, I kind of throw this out. So my wife's had 4 kids. I would say we've had 4 kids, but she did all the work. The way the biology is set up is my wife had the kids, not me. There is no way that doesn't affect careers. So when you see a great example of this is you can graph salary between men and women, or right up on graduation or entering the career ages 22, 23. It's small but very consistent. Women actually make more money than men. And that continues until about age 20, 28, 29, 30, and then it switches, and then men make more money than women. Well, what happens? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what happens there is you have a family. And to say, oh, we're going to have kids, that's not going to affect my career, it's ridiculous. So if you're a firm and you say, well, you're going to have a family, you're going to have kids, you made your choice, so here's kind of your future at the company, and it's not on the same upward trajectory that you were doing, to me, I say, you guys are idiots. You just lost 50% of your top talent because of this attitude of, well, we're paying for the job, and you want to take a break, well, then you're not committed. It's absurd to me. So at different stages in the career, if you can manage that well, you will reacquire 50% of your top talent. And I'm just saying men and women, equally top talent. You'll acquire 50%. And even better, you'll take advantage of your competitors who are boneheads, who say, oh, you wanted to have some kids? Oh, you want to do flex time? Oh, you want to work from home? That doesn't work for us. Peace out, find another job. Great, go get them, because that's awesome talent. Glass stealing, we know about this, talked about this a little bit in diversity. Repatriation, just one comment on this, and that is when we send someone overseas, it can crush their career, A, if they're out of sight and out of mind, which isn't fair to them because they've taken on this risk for you as a company, and also B, when they come back, if we don't repatriate them. Here's what's changed. Here's how we're doing things. Here's the social network. Here's the products, customers, businesses, contracts, whatever it is. So bringing them back and go and spooling back up. Hey, you've been in Shanghai for the last 3 years. Let's give you a little bit of time to get your feet on the ground, figure out where your next step is versus thanks for your time. If you can't contribute on day 1, you're out. So repatriation is an honor to those employees who do that. Second one is dual career couples. I love chasing and hiring dual career couples because of a thing called job embeddedness. If you have a dual career couple that each have a job in the town, even better if they each have a job at your company, if you have a place for both of them, statistically your turnover is much lower. So it's nice. Is there someone who you want as a talent? This is one of those delicate areas because in an interview you can't say to someone, "Hey, are you married? Hey, does your husband have a job?" I mean, like you can't do that. But if it's revealed and you do some research, you go, "Hey, we might have a place for this person too." It's a great way to get them embedded into the organization and to stick. All right, last thing. This is just stages in management mentoring relationships, and that is we talked about in training and development. There's the auditory. There's tell them things and then show them things. That's where a mentor comes in, and then let them practice things with feedback. That's also where a mentor comes in. So you can see kind of left and right, less experienced, more experienced manager. The years are not fixed, of course. This is huge generalization, but on average, this is kind of the pattern. So the big thing I want us to take away from this chapter is there are jobs that are core competencies to our firm, and we as managers need to have a plan to make sure we don't get hosed. If someone doesn't show up, somebody quits, and we're not shocked. We have a plan for that. The second thing is to take ownership of our own careers in conjunction with the organization to say, what do I like? What are my values? What am I good at? How am I seen, etc. And then actually have a career plan, which is different than, I guess I'll see when they promote me. But being intentional about managing our own future and helpful about managing the future of the employees that have trusted us by coming onto our firm. And with that, that's chapter 9.